Hi, this is Mrs. Reichelt, and we're continuing our discussion on the brain, and next up is the diencephalon. So the last video we went through all the areas of the cerebrum, and the diencephalon is also known as the interbrain. So the diencephalon sits on top of the brain stem, so the brain stem is right here, and the diencephalon is made up of these three parts. Those three parts are the thalamus, the hypothalamus, and the epithalamus. Okay, so the thalamus, the hypothalamus, and the epithalamus. And make sure that you actually go through and color each of those. This blue part that I colored is actually the corpus callosum. You can color that if you'd like to. Remember, that's what connects the cerebral hemispheres together. So the thalamus is made up of the crude recognition of senses. Okay, it also surrounds the third ventricle, and remember, those ventricles are those hollow, fluid-filled spaces within the brain, and they're filled with cerebrospinal fluid. The thalamus acts as a relay station for sensory impulses. In addition, it'll transfer those impulses to the correct part of the cortex for localization interpretation. So it's sort of, think of all those crude recognitions go there, and then the thalamus sort of dictates. So if this was the thalamus and it's getting sensory inputs, it's going to kind of send those impulses to the correct area of the cerebrum or wherever it's supposed to go. The hypothalamus sits right under the thalamus, and it's important for the autonomic nervous system center. It helps to regulate body temperature, regulates water balance, and also regulates metabolism. It's an important part of the limbic system, and limbic has to do with the emotions, and it deals with your thirst, your appetite, and also with pain. And next up, the epithalamus forms the roof of the third ventricle. It houses the pineal gland, which is an endocrine gland, and we'll actually talk about that a little bit more in Chapter 9. This also includes the choroid plexus, which forms the cerebrospinal fluid. And as fluid circulates through the ventricles, it also circulates through the brain and also the spinal cord. So that cerebrospinal fluid is always kind of circulating through each of those areas, and the cerebrospinal fluid is made up of the choroid plexus. Okay, so now we're kind of moving into the next part, which is the brainstem, and this is we're on the next page of your study guide here. Now the brainstem attaches to the spinal cord. Okay, so this part is made up of your brainstem, and this is where the spinal cord actually attaches to. There are three major parts to the brainstem. You have the midbrain, the pons, and the medulla oblongata. Okay, so as far as what you're supposed to color here, I'd like you to go through and color the midbrain, and there's a bunch of different areas of the midbrain, but you just really need to color them one color, and you just need to know that collectively each of those areas are called the midbrain. I'd also like you to color the fourth ventricle the same color if you're coloring the other ventricles. You need to color the pons one color, the medulla, and also the cerebellum another color, because we're going to cover that one as well. So the midbrain mostly contains these nerve tracts, okay? They're nerve fibers, and it deals with a reflex center for hearing and also for vision. Then we have the pons, and the pons are the bulging center part of the brainstem, and it contains mostly fiber tracts and helps to control breathing. That's the big one. Make sure you remember that one. And then last part of the brainstem is the medulla oblongata. Now this is the lowest part of the brainstem, and it merges into the spinal cord, and it contains the important control centers. So it deals with heart rate, blood pressure, breathing, swallowing, and vomiting. So the medulla actually controls a whole lot of things that help keep you alive. In addition, you have the reticular formation. Now, the reticular formation is involved in visceral organs, and you have something called the reticular activating system, and this is what helps keep you awake. It helps you go to sleep. It deals with consciousness. So this is what helps keep you on your daily cycles, your circadian rhythms. Okay, so then we move on to the cerebellum. Now, you should have already colored the cerebellum, but it deals with two hemispheres. They're in charge of involuntary control of body movements. They deal with precise timing for skeletal muscle activity, and they also deal with balance and equilibrium.